let's go back to our business case for local production, to access to market rather by local producers. So on the African continent, you have significant buyer consolidation of the market, with Gavi and UNICEF being the major financing and procuring partners for African countries, and they are buying approximately 2/3 of total vaccines that are consumed on the African market by value. And it is expected that by 2030, several African countries are going to transition from the Gavi mechanism, which subsidizes their prices when they are buying through that process. How do you think that transition process is going to influence the procurement channels, the way people are buying vaccines, the volumes, even the prices that countries can expect to pay for those vaccines? And is there a likelihood that countries that are no longer able to leverage and use that subsidized UNICEF Gavi process would basically maybe choose to stay with it because otherwise it's too expensive for them? And do we need to plan for that in terms of how we will mitigate the fact that countries might choose to stay within that process, which will obviously be counterproductive for all of these plans?
Okay, so yeah, obviously this is a big, hairy issue. And I think that, you know, Gavi, and I must say this quite clearly, Gavi has done remarkable work together with UNICEF in ensuring that vaccines get to where they are required most. I think that certainly the African continent would have been in a sorry state had it not been for the contribution and the interventions of Gavi and UNICEF. So I think that acknowledgement of the impact that the Gavi program has had should be appreciated. I think that Gavi has also taken the effort in a very deliberate way to ensure that this dependency is not a forever dependency, that mechanisms are created, that countries reach a point, and there are certain thresholds in terms of GDP, but when countries reach a point, they start to what they call graduate from Gavi and loosen their dependence on Gavi. Now, these things take time to run its course. And I think what we are arguing for is that we're not saying, we've got to do away with the Gavi initiatives, but we've got to be smart about asking the right questions, because providing the right answers to the wrong questions is useless. We have to ask the right questions about what are we trying to solve with respect to not only what Gavi does and UNICEF does, what are we trying to solve in terms of what AVMI is trying to do, in terms of what BioVac might be trying to do, and what the Institute Pasteur de Car are trying to do. So this is not a particular set of questions to interrogate specific organizations and institutions. But I think COVID, and this is the point that I'd like to emphasize, I think COVID is framing another question for us. This is not about, how can we get vaccines more cheaply so that we can get more vaccines? That is, I'm not saying that's not an important question to answer, but that's not the question to answer now. The question to answer is, how do we ensure that we break the cycle of dependency within Africa when it comes to vaccine supply in critical situations? Because when the situation is not critical, there is no driver for breaking the cycle of dependency. So it's only when the situation becomes critical that now we say, oopsie, we can't make our own vaccines. We have to be at the back of the queue, etc., etc. And we've seen that discussion play out over and over again. So what I guess what I'm saying is, in a nutshell, is that the question to be addressed here is, should we ensure that Africa does not have this absolute dependency on vaccine supply from the outside forever?
Yes. So
the next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The next question then is, if we say yes to that question, then we have to say, what are we prepared to do?
Yes.
What price are we prepared to pay? And I'm not talking just in dollars, but what price in terms of commitment? What price in terms of the commitment over a time frame? What price in terms of effort, in terms of skills development programs? That's not just, yeah, we'll pay for someone to study for 3 years and then see where they end up, but a fully structured program.
Yes.
I mean, one of the ideas that we've entertained is, if we could raise the resources, then we should have the companies currently involved in vaccine production as a start, provide a program of internship of maybe 4 or 5 people or 10, that there is a rotation through those companies over a period of 2 or 3 years with academic input, so that there's theory as well as practical. There needs to be a facility established that is associated with routine production and product development, but not dedicated to routine production and product development, because you can't disturb it then to train people. So you have to have this almost duplicate facility in place through which you can funnel interns. And when I talk about interns, I'm talking about people with masters and honors and PhDs coming through there, so that after 2 years, they have touched, smelt, and lived vaccines. And that requires academic input, it requires political input, it requires financial input, it requires commitment from the institutions and companies like BioVac and Vaxera and IPT and IPD. We need to create an ecosystem in terms of skills development.
That's absolutely, I agree with you. I think that ecosystem of talent development that interfaces with the industrial capability development and the academic, side of things, and linking all of that together to develop this human resource that you need to keep that industry going and for it to be sustainable is very critical. But maybe just to circle back, the question I was trying to ask was not how to get a vaccine cheaply. It's really a question that goes back to the sustainability of everything that we are talking about here, the industry that we want to build. I think market access by local manufacturers, it's a big thing. I think, I'm sure you would agree that in some of the considerations in terms of how to make it viable, that has been a big factor. The fact that local manufacturers generally tend to be able to access maybe the market within their borders and not beyond. Now, when it comes to international procurement, the fact that the market, the self-procurement market itself, it's just a third of the total procurement that is happening on the African continent, and the other 2/3 are happening through international mechanism. And the challenge there, which I think needs to be considered and thought about and have conversations about, is the fact that those international mechanisms have generally been closed off to local manufacturers, and that circles back to how sustainable and viable those business models can be. So I think it's a very important point to discuss what is going to happen when countries transition, and whether they choose to stay with the international procurement mechanisms that are very much closed off to local manufacturers, and how you deal with all of those aspects to make sure that when you develop, or you have the 4-5 initial manufacturers that you're going to build up on the African continent, they have the access to the market that allows them to build a business case that is actually sustainable and can actually survive beyond the crisis, or whatever the situation is. So really, maybe if we could go back with that sort of explanation in place, whether the African Union, and as the initiative that you're leading in thinking about this, whether there needs to be a way of mitigating or persuading countries that may choose not to move away after graduating and stay with that mechanism, because that has a real impact on the sustainability of the business models, especially given that the available evidence shows that in the past, most countries that have transitioned from those international mechanisms that subsidize purchase of vaccines have continued or chosen to continue to procure with that. So you either have those mechanisms open to the local manufacturers you're going to be developing, or you have to figure out a way of making sure you develop other mechanisms that creates market access for the people you're going to be supporting and developing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And what this boils down to is everybody needs to nail their colors to the mast. Countries should not vacillate in terms of what they may or may not do. And this is what is meant by commitment. Commitment is not negotiable. It's negotiable whether you're going to commit or not. But when you commit, then it's not negotiable after that. Otherwise, it's not a commitment by definition. So when we talk about commitment, this is what we are referring to in terms of interventions that could be facilitated or promoted by the African Union, regional economic communities, or even individual countries. But we need to arrive at a destination where we say, okay, guys, get out of the bus now, and let's just recognize where we are now, and who is going to be doing what, and who's prepared to be doing what before we get on the bus as if we're all going to the same destination, because we're not. And so basically, to use this analogy, we're interested in understanding what is the AU's position going to be with respect to facilitating a pool procurement mechanism, maybe, with certain incentives attached to it. What levers can it engage to incentivize this? And how can it create a focused attention on being part of what is required to incentivize vaccine production? So when we talk about governments and Pan-African organizations incentivizing manufacturing, at the heart of it, in its fundamental essence, is this issue of how are you going to procure your vaccines, and can we set up mechanisms of advanced market commitments, or whatever you want to call it. But basically, we want to say is, given an equal, all things being equal, will you buy local? And this can't be, you won't buy local because I want $1 for it, and you can get it outside for 90 cents. We need to say that the investment required to get this thing going demands of us that there's going to be more asked of us initially. And I'm talking about from the people putting money on the table, because you can't have your cake and eat it there. And we need to get out of this. We need to get out of this paradigm of having the cake and eating it. We want everything, but we want it for nothing. We want it overnight. We don't want to be robust and resilient in driving it forward. and ensuring that it delivers, and we want it for next to nothing. So to give you an example, and there are many numbers that are thrown about, but to give you an example, for a vaccine production facility, which will have the ability to make two different products in the drug substance, so there's two side-by-side suites, and then it has two filling lines in that facility to fill different products, in the order of about 50 million units each side, so that combined you have 100 million unit capacity, which if you filled single doses into it, your capacity would be 100 million doses per annum. If you filled 10 doses into it, it wouldn't quite be 1 billion doses, but it would probably be 700 million doses. So you have this surge capacity built into it. Yes. That kind of facility, depending on who you talk to, could set you back in the order of $250 million. Yeah. Now, if you made 1 million, let me get my maths right here now. So if you made 250 million doses per year, okay, and you then made a profit of $1 on each of those doses, you can recover your investment in 1 year. Yeah. Okay, simple mathematics, economics. But the likelihood of you producing 250 million doses in the first year of production is 0. Yeah. So you're going to start off with 10 or 50 million doses if you're lucky. Yeah. Now you can see how that then stretches the timeline to get your return on investment. Now you're saying, oh, instead of 250, I can only make 10 million doses, so that's a factor of 25. So over 25 years now, it will take me 25 years to recover that investment if I make $1 a dose profit. Now I say, can I make $10 a dose profit, because then I can recover my investment in 2.5 years. So you can see that through simple little playing around with numbers, you get a feel for this is how the economics of vaccine production works. Yes. So with the market and the price that the market will absorb is fundamentally important.
Absolutely. And you're preaching to the converted here. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I mean, for me, the economics of this are really beyond arguing. If you have a pandemic coming in less than 12 months, wiping away your development and economic progress of, billions of dollars, a couple of decades, 3 decades easily in a year, then, I mean, $250 million is really small change when you think about the kind of losses you're looking at if you don't make that investment. So it's a no-brainer. You think?
I'm glad you think so, and that is why I made the earlier statement that the cost of not doing it is unimaginable.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. We are almost getting to the end. I don't want to keep you longer than we have to. I've seen that you are very optimistic. You're very encouraged by the developments that are happening. But obviously, there's still a gap between where we really need to be and where we are right now. Do you have any actions that you think, that you want to leave us with in terms of what we should be doing right now to close that gap? For instance, I don't know whether it's getting more signatures with the AMA. What are the most critical things in your view that governments and other stakeholders that are involved in building this up should be doing right now urgently for us to really close that gap and get us closer to getting this underway?
I think there's an opportunity that is ripe for the picking here, and that is, I think that what everybody's looking for, this includes outside stakeholders, potential technology transfer partners, other governments that are perhaps willing to also put funding on the table, or access to materials or training opportunities, etc., etc. I think that we need to not lose any opportunity to confirm our commitment as African governments to this venture of a lifetime that we have in building vaccine production capability. And as you said, that I think an easy win would be the signal to ratify the African Medicines Agency and get that done and dusted. It's a no-brainer as far as many of us are concerned, and I think that if African governments can rally around, put pen to paper, get that done and dusted, it's an easy win. We can, because this is all about building the momentum, building the track record, building the confidence. We know that we start off from on the back foot because no one has confidence. No one has confidence in African governments to actually deliver. And we each have stories of what went wrong. And I think we need to say, where do the opportunities lie now for us through little engagements to say, look what's going right. And I point to the AMA as as one example. I think that for me, it's personally encouraging that the African CDC seems to be the vehicle through which the African Union is driving this agenda forward. And I'm looking forward to how that coordination is going to be taking place. But I think we need to also identify quick wins, because it's the quick wins where you see the needle being shifted that draws more focused attention, more partnerships, and more assistance. And this is not about taking time to develop this perfect grand plan. It's a case of saying, let's move on many fronts, simultaneously partner with people who have been there, done that, look where the opportunities lie within Africa currently, engage with those who are putting up their hands to say, we also want to, and see how we can draw all of these together in an integrated plan. But it's about doing little things consistently that will take us forward, not just this, oh, we have a press announcement, big announcement to make. That's important. That's important. I'm not belittling that. But behind the scenes, there's got to be this confidence that we building one layer on top of the other layer, steadily but surely.
That's a perfect way for us to end. The confidence building, the taking actions that shows others that African countries are committed, that builds their confidence in that. The CEO of Moderna was announcing the other day that Moderna was not going to be enforcing its patents on its RNA vaccine, and they are looking at the possibility of building a production facility on the African continent. And those little things, putting your signature down, would signal to potential partners like that to say that we are serious, come to the table, we are ready to work with you in terms of how we take this forward. Thank you so much, Patrick. Mr. Patrick Tippoo, the Executive Director of the African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative. It's a pleasure to have you on our podcast, Patrick.
It's my pleasure, and my thanks to you for inviting me to be part of Let's Talk About Health in Africa. I've certainly found it a privilege, and I look forward to further conversations here.
Fantastic. I hope you will come back again and share with us your progress on these very exciting initiatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.